First off, the new Talas album, 1985. It's kind of a fascinating idea because, as you've alluded to in other interviews, it was kind of this time capsule, but it wasn't fully fleshed out. And so, first of all, I'm wondering, when you went back to the songs that were, for most part, created in 1985, what state were they in, and what else needed to be done to them?
Well, they were trapped in time because they had been pretty much untouched uh, up until now. We played some live shows, and we did most everything that's on the record in the live shows. So we did perform them, but we didn't change anything about them really. And we made a choice between two. Our two options were uh, make them slick and modernize and bring them all up to date, bring them right up to the year 2022 or three,
Mm.
or go back and let's do them the way we did them. We chose to do it that way because there's a real thing about that year and that time in music, 1985. So we thought, well, let's do it as close to the that time period in music and writing and vibe and all those other things. And I dare say I think we pulled it off pretty well. We went in and recorded it for real. You know, it was that's an important aspect of that
Hmm.
part of the equation. And we included one new song, Black and Blue. We were doing that live, and it's one of Phil's songs, and he's a wonderful writer, and it gave us the opportunity also to have his son James join us.
Hmm.
So vocal harmonies, did a great job on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we obviously just kind of left them the way they were and went back, dug them up, dusted them off, and played them.
And was there any kind of internal struggle as you were, laying down your parts, thinking, well, if I was doing this nowadays, I would probably play this, but back then I would probably play that. Was it difficult to bounce back and forth mentally with that idea?
I don't believe so. I think
Okay.
there's not a lot of thought goes into it. As funny as that sounds, pardon me, a lot of journalists often question that, like what the plan was, or how did you figure this out, or whatever. But it's just kind of let nature take its course. And
Mm.
I rarely, if ever, think things through or plan ahead. For me personally, as a musician, and most of the musicians I work with, we're there. Here's the song. Here's the thing. Let's do this. There's not a lot of pre-planning. So um, they're kind of built into our DNA. And like I said, we had played them live recently, so that I'm really glad about because we had a real chance to get our sea legs back, get our footing back on those particular songs. And they were a blast to play back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, there's some chaotic, hilarious stuff in there. So we did enjoy that. So yeah, I didn't. I'm not a thinker. As a matter of fact, there was as far as playing live, there's a famous saying that I've spread around. I forgot who originated it. It was not me, but if as far as musicians, if you think, you stink. So if
Oh.
you're thinking while you're playing and figuring and all that, it's like you're speaking. If you're stopping before every sentence and trying to plan out what you're going to say next, it's not from the heart. And
Hmm.
I'm sure you've spoken to people that are thinking about what they're saying prior while you're talking. They're not listening. They're thinking about what they're going to say next. It's just not a real heart to heart. Or when somebody's reading off a teleprompter or reading from a sheet of paper, if you could just do it, just speak directly. And if you know what you're talking about well enough, it'll come out great and people will understand it. And music being a language, I think there's a parallel there.
Yeah. No, that is an interesting parallel because and um yeah, because that is a pet peeve of mine. And luckily I haven't had this too much. But there have been some occasions where I've been interviewing someone and the person obviously has a rote answer that
Uh,
they give to things. And so they're not really listening to what the question is. They're just like firing in, and it's like, oh, that's not really what I asked, but okay,
yeah, yeah.
if this is your deal, okay.
I'm glad you've experienced that, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And no, so I love, that's a I've never looked at it that way, but that is a great, comparison. And you talk about when you say that you recorded these live, just to clarify, I assume it mean everyone playing in the same room at the same time. You recorded at Marcus Miller's house, even, and
Yeah.
you know, again, in the days of all this technology where everyone can just piece things together in their own individual homes and recording studios and everything. um what is it about getting together, and actually seeing one another as you play that creates, I don't know, a better sound?
It's an intangible. I'm not sure exactly what it is, and I believe you can carry on without that. And I've done a lot of records where I'm in another city, and I've played for a long, long time and played a lot of different styles of music. So I'm listening to the drummer anyway. And if I was recording, I would probably be in the control room listening to the playback monitors and playing along like that, because it's difficult for me to be out in a room with headphones. I really can't hear what I'm doing. And so I've done a lot of records like that, which are in effect us not being in the same room, technically, but because we're all there, there's a group dynamic that happens with any bunch of creative people, more than one. They work off each other, and I do believe that you get a better product, audio wise, sonically. I'm not sure if it's better or worse, but I do believe the vibe that goes into it and the thinking and the ideas, because right up until you record a record in general, it's not true for everybody, but in general, things are still in flux. They're still malleable. They're still plastic. They can be moved around.
Yeah.
So, and that's a very important factor, because many times I remember doing the Sink Your Teeth Into That record. As the vocalist was at the mic, I would have to say, "Hold on a second," and one song was just particularly too wordy. I just crossed out every other line. I'll just go, and it made for a much better song. The vocals set in the track better. It wasn't trying to rush and to get all these mouthfuls of word out. And so everything changed around that. So when you have a whole bunch of people in a room together working on a piece of music, many factors are at play. And the one I believe that is probably the most noticeable is that interaction and creativity and last minute changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then with this album, what really struck me is there's this, and I mean this in a positive way, sense of urgency about almost every song. It's, and not like a panicky sense of urgency, but more like, if we don't express this, we've have this energy bottled up, and if we don't express it, we're just going to explode. And I'm wondering, for you, where does that sense of urgency come from when you play?
Well, I believe it's a little bit of a holdover of what our state of mind was back in that time period, because we were there was an urgency, because we did get signed at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Gold Mountain Records signed the band. Danny Goldberg was the head of that. He went on later to manage Nirvana. He's quite a big guy in the music biz. So there was a little bit of relief there, but even then we knew, even if we do a record, there's no guarantee it's going to be any success at all or anything to come from it. I've seen amazing bands release great records and nothing happened. So there was always an urgency to, man, we gotta, I forgot what story it is about a captain that takes his men on a ship to an island, and they burn the ship. So you either win or die in trying. No choice to go back. In a way, life was kind of like that a little bit for us. So not in a panic way, as you mentioned, but there certainly was an urgency. So I think psychologically, going back and playing those records, a little bit of that may have come out again and raised its head in the room there while we're recording.
Yeah.
Plus we didn't, I remember a lot of recording that occurred back in those days was quick, was real quick. I did, I think it was in '85, the fall of '85. I did Tony McAlpine's record while I was with David Lee Roth.
Mm-hmm.
I'd already out to LA, and Tony asked me to come up to San Francisco to record a record. And we had 2 or 3 days, and it was a complicated record. And so I would be in the studio tracking to the drums. I'd get done. I'd go to the another little building at the studio to learn the next song, and I'd pass Tony in the parking lot, and he'd go in to do guitar, and we'd pass each other again. And we somehow we did it in like 2 or 3 days. We got the whole record
Wow.
recorded. So and that I like that sense of urgency, and it's just that not necessarily panic, but just that thing looming over your head is you better get it done. It better be right because the clock is running here. So.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think really, and there's something to be said for something where you really plan out like an epic album over, time and stuff. But
Oh yeah,
there's some interesting aspects that come from just that, let's try and capture this moment as quickly as possible. It reminds me of years ago, I spoke to a friend of yours, Mike Portnoy, about one of his side projects, the Liquid Tension Experiment, where they would just go in and say, all right, 1 week, we're cranking out an album, and just
yeah.
let it fly. And it's, now that I think about it, there's that same kind of sense of urgency and energy to the new Talas album.
Excellent. I'm glad you feel that way. Yeah, I had the great fortune of meeting and hanging out with Robert Fripp in Japan one time,
Oh, wow.
and he came to the Mr. Big show, and we had him sitting on the side of the stage. He's a wonderful guy. Afterwards, we went to a bar and had a couple drinks, and he was telling me all the amazing stories of the. 'Cause I was a huge King Crimson fan.
Yeah.
He basically, I hope I got this right, or it's nearly correct. The details they did in the Court of the Crimson King in a week in somebody's living room. That was how it was recorded. So,
Wow.
and you see something that's that epic, earth-shattering
Right.
importance. It's amazing to see something like that can come about quickly, and speaks volumes about the talent of the people involved, of course. And another example, similarly, I've got the demos for The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is
Hmm.
just an epic piece, a double album set by Genesis with Peter Gabriel.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, it's
The final song is called It, and it is the punchline of the whole record. And, unbelievable how the song came about and the lyrics of it and what they mean. And it's just a glorious, incredible piece of music. And in the demo, Peter Gabriel is just doing blah blah lyrics. In other words, he
Mhm.
made the lyrics up later. I thought for sure he had this whole thing penned out and figured because it was really constructed brilliantly.
Yeah.
But he's just blah 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 through the thing, and then later went out and figured out what the lyrics would be, and then
Right, right.
they fit together. Pure genius.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So even some of the more grandiose records that seem to have taken a long time, even there's a spontaneity to those. I believe sometimes that is makes them quite magical.
Yeah. Although it's interesting how the same people involved can be both, spontaneous and, for lack of a better term, calculating. If only
Yeah, that's
because
true.
going back to the King Crimson reference, I don't know if you ever heard in the '90s, Adrian Belew released a solo album called Here, which I thought was fantastic. But it's only him. He plays every single instrument, does every single vocal. He did everything except plug in the chords, on all this. And it's
And he may have done some of that.
well, I think he said I have no engineering skills. That's the only thing I can't do. But and so I don't know. And so it's fascinating to me that there are guys, with that much talent that, okay, they can do the spontaneous or they can do,
Yeah.
something much more structured. And it's still fascinating either way.
Yeah, it's quite a palette of colors and
Yeah.
quite an array of brushes that we have, and quite a selection of medium to paint it on, from
Yeah.
wood
Yeah.
canvas to cement to steel to who knows what. So I often cite parallels between a lot of the different forms of art that we have in humanity and in the world. I think there are many.
Yeah. And one thing you said about this album was you were talking about bringing '80s hard rock into 2022. And I'm
Yes.
just curious, from your perspective, what elements of '80s hard rock are maybe harder to find in 2022?
Well, A lot of it of what we've just been speaking of, that chaos, that spontaneity, that little bit of pressure to get it
Hmm.
done because we don't know what's going to happen the next day. So things of that nature, I think, are important factors in the music of then. And now there is a little bit of relaxation, possibly, not with everyone. Generalities are never true, and there's a generality that's always true.
Yeah.
That, because you can sit down and get an engineer and piece through things and kind of play a part at a time and go back and check it and change it and fix it if you need to and continue on. It's quite a different thing. We were slaves to the tape back in the day. This was before digital recording. The first digital recording I think I did was the first Mr. Big record.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and so, but you had to get it on tape, and it had to be right, especially the drum track. That had to be righteous because you couldn't edit the drum. You could, but it was always precarious to edit the drums on
That's a
2 inch
lot of
tape.
splicing
And it
involved.
was
Yeah.
tough to do. We always have to leave the control rooms first, so it's absolute silence while they did it. Okay, come on back. We
Yeah.
got it. And, but now you can do anything. If you can
Yeah.
imagine it, you can do it, and probably can do it backwards as well. It's which is a great thing, and it's an amazing artistic tool. I'm not against it at all. I was an early adopter of all things digital, for sure. But there was an urgency back then that did I think show up in the grooves of the vinyl, which we are pretty much no longer with us as well,
Yeah.
because it's mostly digital files we're downloading and stuff. And I love that too. I was a big fan of when I had my iTunes. When I first got my iTunes, I ripped every CD that I had,
Hmm.
which was a significant collection. Managed to get it all into my iTunes collection, and since then I've got over 2 terabytes of iTunes. Uh, Finally curated with the album cover art and song titles are all
Nice.
correct. It's quite a thing, and I love that because I can go at any time, just click on something, and there it is. I don't have to pull it out of the vinyl. There's an argument about quality and sound. That's fair enough. There could be certainly some things uh, that people prefer. Older ways, tape and vinyl. That's fair enough. But I generally just like to be able to hear the songs I love in a pretty good tonality.
Yeah, I
So
mean, and the technology is getting better at that.
yeah,
The fact that it's coming from you though is somewhat ironic, if only because usually, in terms of sound quality, like if I use it to, I'll stream something to check it out and just have easy access in the car. But if I really like it, then I'll buy like a CD. And what I often get with the CD that I don't get with the say the streaming service or the digital version is the full effect of the bass.
yeah.
That and so that's it's funny that you're of all people so open-minded about the whole experience when it's your stuff in particular that you really appreciate it when you step away from streaming and get back to at least CDs.
Yeah, well, there's we do have subwoofers now that we didn't have in our old home stereo systems back in the day,
Yeah.
so that helps a bit. But yeah, there's an adjustment to make. But for me, the general when I'm listening to something for sonic quality, yeah, I would want it to be a high bit rate, as good as I could get. But when I just want to hear a song because I love it and I need to hear it just to satisfy myself. I take some liberties with that for sure.
Yeah.
You're sitting around a room and it's crowded and you're having a couple glasses of wine. Hey, play that song by here it is. I'm not really concerned that it's not 20 to 20
Yeah.
frequency bandwidth and all that. And for live and my bass playing is another story. That's still coming through speakers,
Right.
and it's well attended to.
Yeah. And then kind of along those lines, yesterday I was texting with a mutual friend, a gentleman named Rich Redmond, who best known as
Yeah,
the drummer for Jason Aldean, but also played with you on the album by The Fell, a side project you guys had a few years back.
yeah.
And so I asked him about you and what makes him enjoy playing with you so much. And he talked about that you have a very unique style, and he said his tone sounds like a giant church organ. which I thought was a fabulous description because
Great.
it's like, oh no, that really kind of does capture that. And I'm wondering though, you know, the evolution of your tone, of your sound, how much of it was it just kind of stumbled into it, and how much of it was I have this in my head and I'm going to go find it.
A little of both, as you might expect the answer to be. My goal was always to hear the notes. I want to hear what the notes are because the notes make up the music, and if the notes have a tone that you can hear what the note is. I've seen bands recently, and I couldn't discern a single bass note from the bass player. Sadly, I heard
Mm.
there's a rumble going on in a big room, in an auditorium, whatever, but I can't hear him playing. Bass is tough to reproduce live in the first place because in a big room, a lot of variables. But so I started to do a thing with splitting a signal
Hmm.
so I can the bass and the higher frequencies can be isolated and you can balance them out so you can really hear what that note is. But
Mm.
we don't want to lose that low end because normally the low end does muddy things up. Uh, but you can't lose the low end because that's the essence of what you're doing. That's the
Yeah.
basis of the instrument. So by separating them out, I'm hearing the note, but I'm not losing that low end. And it was a double. My basses have two outputs, one
Oh.
of the super deep low pickup and one of a normal pickup. And so that helps a lot. I started doing that back in the very early 70s. And
Mm.
since then, and I got involved in a lot of pro audio stuff as opposed to just guitar or bass amps. Eventually had racks of gear. And we even had racks before Anvil made them. There were Bud racks, which were used in radio stations.
Oh.
Nobody had racks live at
Yeah.
all in the 70s. So eventually that came to be a thing for guitarists and other musicians as well. They have all their gear in a rack because it's all pro audio gear. So it was pretty finely tuned for the most part. I spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of education,
Mm.
uh, educating myself into understanding musical instrument electronics and the reproduction of a sound from fingers, strings, pickup, chord, uh, preamps and amps, speakers. So I got to be pretty good, if I do say so myself, at troubleshooting sonic situations. And
Hmm.
so it eventually came out to a point where it's a unique tone. Probably not, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea at all, but I do also often play just direct and straight up, just a regular bass, one output right into an Avalon or a Neve preamp and a
Hmm.
proper pro audio compression or EQ. I've done a lot of records like that too. So, but you can still kind of hear that sound. So, another important aspect is it's your hands.
Mm.
Richie Kotzen was in town 2 nights ago, and I got up and jammed with him, and just grabbed his bass player's bass, which is not the kind of bass I play at all, and the amp was there, and people said, "There's your tone." I go, "It was all I had was these."
Yeah.
So that's good to know, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right. And with the 1985 album, listening to that, there's always a special relationship, with the drummer and the bass player, and the
Oh
bass
yeah.
always locking in with the drummer. But what really struck me with this album is the amount of interplay between you and the various guitar parts. And I'm wondering how you work that out. I'm going to butcher his name with Kier?
Cheery.
Kiri. Okay. I'm wondering how you work that out with Kiri.
Well, if the guitar part is there, I'll figure out my part. If my part is there, he will usually take the lead. And some things are mapped out to some degree. I generally prefer spontaneity, but if you're going to play something in harmony or in counterpoint or unison, you
Hmm.
have to do there's a little planning is required there.
Yeah.
uh, I've recorded a lot of songs during the pandemic here in my home studio. People just sending them in. A lot of guitarists wanted me to double their licks, whatever, and I have to send it back to some pro. It's got to be perfect for me to double it. If there's a couple of flubs or slips, I can't play that. I
Mm.
mean, I could, but you don't want that. So a lot of times they'd have to go back and correct the thing they did to really get it super tight. Because when I
Oh.
did it with Steve Vai or Paul Gilbert or with Richie or Tony or any of the guys I've played with, their guitar part is rock solid, and they know exactly every note. And so I've got to be, I got to know what I'm doing to either weave in between those notes, as I said, harmonize them, play them in unison, or do a counterpoint. So that does require a little bit of planning. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of nice because once you get it and get it down, that the planning falls away and it just becomes playing between two people that are singing the right words.
Yeah, more
They're singing the wrong words.
right. And like you said, it becomes that conversation, a musical conversation between these two people.
Very much so.
Um, and then, and then to kind of jump, the last track on this album, which, if I'm getting it right, 7IHDH. If
Yes, and
oh,
that's upside down. That's for Phil.
oh, okay. I
Comes from the Sink Your Teeth into that record back in '81 or '82 when we did that. Uh, we had NV43345 was the name of a little bass solo, and that's Sheehan upside down. If you
okay, okay, yeah, because that was
so
one of my questions. Was
in that
where the
tradition, I did a little piece just to give my honor and heartfelt farewell to our dear friend Phil, who, as you know, we lost soon after the record was finished. And he was just an amazing, wonderful guy and a joy to be around. And we're all quite devastated, as you can imagine. And the record initially was, to pay honor and tribute to the crowds and the awesome audiences and the great times we had back in '85. And it's kind of morphed over a little bit into really commemorating the legacy of Phil Naro. And he was just a great, really, truly honest, sweet man and wonderful guy, and had a great voice. And he pulled it off on this record like blew all of our minds. Uh, quite a moment for all of us of inspiration to see someone shouldering that kind of a burden and still go up to the mic and knock it out of the park every time. Pretty amazing.
yeah, and just for the record, he was taken way too early because of cancer, which he had been battling. Um,
Yeah.
and what, in your opinion, made him the perfect singer for Talas?
Well, he was a great entertainer. He was an exciting performer. He gave it everything he could. He was a wild man on stage, but his voice was under control.
Mm,
There's a nice parallel between the two things. And when you're in a band, a big factor is can you get along? Can you be on the same tour bus or in the van? Can you be at the same hotel or at the same table for a meal and everybody gets along? And that's another big factor. And all the Talas guys on this record, we just had a wonderful time working on the record and hanging out together. And Phil is like I say, he's a joy to be around, and just a truly wonderful guy. And he's funny, and he was loved by everybody that knew him. It was
mm,
just so great to work with somebody like that. Sometimes you find great players and they're really amazing and they do so great in the band, but they get off the stage and it's tough. And you got to spend all your day with them, in airports, waiting in line, going through customs, checking into the hotel,
yeah.
sound check, sitting around all day waiting for the show to start. So when you have people that are really quality, wonderful people, it makes a big, big difference. So
Hmm.
Phil, in that respect, was just a joy to be around, and he sang his ass off. And his writing was very creative too. I thought he was an excellent writer, so he contributed a lot to the band.
Yeah. And so with that instrumental track for Phil, um, where how do you put together a piece like that? And is there are there kind of words and imagery going through your mind as you go through the song, even though there aren't lyrics?
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of instrumental music, and it can speak volumes uh, if done right, of course. And I just wanted to kind of put myself in the state of mind of just thinking of him, honoring his legacy, and saying a farewell to him. And then I just let it go, and that's what I did. And me and my engineer in here, we just put it together.
Yeah.
Let it happen again organically and naturally. And I hope in whatever situation he is in that he perceives it And
Yeah.
I hope he understands how much he's missed and how much he was loved.
Mm. And another instrumental, you guys just released a video of you guys performing Farandole, and it's another amazing instrumental in the sense that there are a lot of instrumentals out there where it's putting it delicately, people just showing off. And it's but these sound like actual songs,
Yeah.
if you understand. And it's almost like you listen to you guys performing Farandole and it's like, I know it's an instrumental, but I swear there's words. Like I can feel words just out of reach, you know?
Yeah.
Um
Pardon me.
no problem. Um what is the key to achieving that effect with an instrumental?
Well, this was a classical piece by
Right.
Bizet, and that helps because he's a composer, put his heart and soul and mind into it. It's a variation on it. It's not nearly an identical representation of it. I don't know if you would appreciate it or not. The original idea came from Love Sculpture, which was Dave Edmunds' band, I believe
Oh.
Dave Edmunds, and he did a version of that and Saber Dance. And I remember hearing it back way in the early 70s. And man, I like to do this way. That was a kind of a standard Talas piece and it morphed and got faster and got parts changed. So we drifted away from the original year by year. So going back to it now, we did add a few things to it. I did a little bit. Kiri did this melodic intro prior to his soloing in the solo section. So I harmonized that part with him. So that's a new thing. But it was just something that was a blast to play because it was high speed, high energy, chaos under control. Chaos on a leash, if you will. and it was a blast to play live. We'd always make a joke, anybody want to dance? Here we go. Holy shit. So it was always fun to play. And Mark Miller, just mind blowing. He's what a spectacular drummer. I love working with him. So without Phil, we managed to put this together and do it again. Just again, a little bit in his honor because it was during this song that he was able to go backstage and have a drink and towel off,
Right.
and continue his awesomeness.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I really think "Chaos on a Leash" should be a title of something in the future. An
Right
album,
on.
a single, something. Besides the 80s vibe that you guys bring to the music on this album, I'm sure I'm not the first person to bring this up. Crystal Clear, the song Crystal Clear kicks off, and my head immediately goes to the Police's Roxanne. Is that tune kind of an homage to them? Did it, was it an influence or was it just happenstance?
Well, Mitch Perry wrote that song, and I don't think he was necessarily thinking of that, though I know I don't know anybody who isn't a Police fan. I love that band. And I actually never thought of that until this record was done, and I'm playing it for some friends, and one guy went, Roxanne. I go, oh yeah, I never even thought about that until somebody said something recently, and the song is from back in '84, '85. So I saw the Police on their very first tour. I love that band. I love Sting. I love the guitarist and drummer as well. So if it is, I'm glad. I'm glad it's reminding you because there's two songs I pulled my car over when I heard them on the radio.
Oh.
One was Blondie hanging on the telephone, and the other one was Roxanne by the Police. I heard that and I just had to pull over and listen. I just love that band so much. It was a huge fan. So if it reminds anybody of that, I'm very happy.
Well, all right, now I got to ask, it's an experienced professional musician, what elevates a song to that status that you have to pull off to the side of the road to give it all of your attention?
Well, it's different for everybody. For me, it was just a burst of all the things I love. The drum parts were great. The bass was cool. The vocals were amazing. There was a great chorus. And the recording is kind of odd when they're singing Roxanne and harmonizing it. The bass drums are triggering the compressor, and it's actually going Roxanne. He pressed the string and on, and so a flaw that made it great for me. It just sounded urgent and real. And the Blondie song, another one, that was
Yeah.
during a time when a lot of new wave stuff was hitting the airwaves, and it's just prior to a big surge in heavy metal. So in late '70s, Joe Jackson, the Police, U2, bands like that in that time period. So we were. I was very much a fan of a lot of that stuff when it came out, and I've changed with the style, and then things started getting a lot more heavy metal with the Judas Priest and Accept and AC/DC, and then I walked down that path because I love that too. But I love a broad spectrum of music, and hearing a really well done power pop by great players is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's changed direction slightly, so it's it's a really interesting, unique cover guys have for this album. I think I read it was created by Hugh, who famously did a lot of work for Rush. Um, what input did you guys have as to what it would look like, and why the discarded DeLorean as the focal point?
Well, yeah, Hugh Syme, a wonderful, wonderful guy. We were very, very grateful that he was so kind to do this for us. Uh, it's his idea. He came up with it completely, and we had a conversation on the phone. We had some laughs and talked about things back then. And the DeLorean and Back to the Future. That movie was 1985. So we're right. We landed right on the right time spot. The time machine landed on the right year, and we again we it paralleled perfectly with our idea that let's get in a time machine and go back to 1985 instead of making the songs all modern and perfect.
Yeah.
So he nailed that one too. He's just got a great instinct for picking up what's going on, which has been obvious in some of his other endeavors as well. I mean, he's done covers for bands that are just kind of epitomize what's inside that package.
Yeah.
And in this case, he really did a great job, and everyone who sees the cover is tickled by it. It's pretty cool.
The coincidence in all of this is one of my clients that I've been working with for years is Huey Lewis and the News, and so I haven't heard back yet. But last night I sent the band the picture of the cover, and I said, "I think you guys are really going to like this cover and get a kick out of it." So,
oh, great. Yeah, and ironically and coincidentally, I think they just came out with a new DeLorean.
really,
I think I saw it on the news. There's a new DeLorean.
oh
So,
my God,
so
wow.
they got a new car. We got a new record. And
Okay, yeah, yeah, all right.
it all
And
goes
yeah,
together.
hopefully this time the CEO doesn't have a new coke habit. We'll see what happens.
And we're hoping he's
Right, right.
right on.
And then you talked about Phil and what a dynamic lead singer he was, um, and which said something because Lord knows you have backed up some amazing lead singers. When I
Yeah.
was going through past interviews of yours, a recurring theme was that you said David Lee Roth is my hero, and obviously you've worked with a number of impressive people. You've named some of them here today. What makes Diamond Dave a hero in your opinion?
That's a pretty thick book.
Mm.
In fact, there's so much about him that was inspiring to me and that I learned from. And the first time I went to see Van Halen, we're all going to see Eddie, but then we were transfixed by the lead singer, even though we're all muso heads and waiting to see Eddie do his thing and all that. But holy cow, this guy, he was just so entertaining. And I often say, and I don't mean it in any negative, please, no one take it that way at all. It's just an observation, maybe incorrect too. But I said, without Dave, Ed would have been Gary Moore, great player. Everybody loves him, but not everybody knew about him.
Mm-hmm.
And without Ed, Dave would have been Jim Dandy Mangrum. Just Jack Daniels swigging blonde haired,
Right.
girls all over the place. So the two of them together was a fortuitous event for all music fans. I just got finished reading Ted Templeman's book, his biography.
Oh,
And, it was great info there about the early days of Van Halen, and he also
okay.
speaks about the "Eat 'Em and Smile" record, which he produced as well. And yeah, with Dave, it goes deep. He's a storyteller. He's a songwriter. His lyrics, I think, are just brilliant too. Uh, it was not just the "Baby I Love You" or "You Broke My Heart" lyrics.
Right.
There's some depth there, and it's pretty cool. And he's just the way he carried himself was very inspirational. After working with him, I consider I have a PhD in showbiz 101. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, I can't remember which one this was. I was watching some podcast interview with you where you were, I think you were talking about, oh, how bands that actually stayed away from using baby love and
yeah,
those,
Heart Love Baby.
yeah, those particular words, because past Otis Redding, it's tough to make it, give it any more feeling. Um, so yeah, no, that's I mean it's great to hear, because I don't know, all the rumors and everything they always fly around at lightning speed, and so it's always great to hear something where it's like, this person is impressive because of this and this, and
Yeah, he's quite a lover of adventure, and applying that to being in a rock and roll band, I think he managed to make it quite an adventure. And for myself, Steve Vai, Greg Bissonette, and Brett Tuggle as well, we on that tour, Eat 'Em and Smile. It was amazing. We all still get together. Sadly, we lost Brett, the keyboard player, recently. But me, Steve, and Greg often get together and hang out and tell stories of the old days, and it's a riot. It's a riot.
Nice. Well, that could be another book.
For sure. Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, that takes care of all the questions I had. Is there anything we did not cover that you want to talk about?
The record comes out September 23rd. There's a new winery record that's done, mixed mastered, and we even chose the cover for it. That'll be out relatively soon. I don't have a release date on it yet. They're booking shows for the Winery Dogs next year. There might be some Mr. Big next year. Nothing confirmed yet, but there's a couple rumors floating around. And we may try to do some Talas shows. We're checking into some singers that would like to pay a little tribute to Phil.
Yeah.
So that might be a possibility, I hope. It would be nice to play that stuff. So we'll see. So it's going to be a busy year next year. During the pandemic, like I said, I'm home. I recorded over 600 tracks and about 8 or 10 albums through the. So it has been a busy time and a great learning experience too. Recording all this music from classical to jazz to hard country to experimental to electronic dance music to you name it, and death metal and heavy and hard rock. So it's been an interesting experience recording such a wide array of styles of music. So I'm just looking forward to get back up on stage next year and start playing live again.
Yeah. Well, that does, if you don't mind, just one more question. It does make me think, because you are amazingly prolific, and again, like as in creating a tune, I'm wondering how much of it is planned with your career, with what you've done, and how much of it is just let's see what happens.
It's almost all let's see what happens.
Okay.
It's been kind of an ongoing theme throughout my certainly my music and probably my life too. You roll with the changes, you recover from the punches, and you keep going forward. And I'm still learning. Every morning I'm down here for hours on this thing, just working on ideas. I got my little cell phone here. I make a selfie video of explaining. Okay, now when the chorus comes, or here's a different way of playing that lick. Now let's do it backwards, and recording all that so I can have a reference later. And that has been a great thing too. I've had a long time to sit at home and just work on my playing, and I'm always working on it. We'll continue to work on it for my whole life. There's that adventure never ends. I believe there's always more to learn. There's always more to understand. Doesn't mean necessarily playing faster or crazier. It's different ways of treating time and different melodic sentiments and things like that. So it's quite an unending journey.